Hi guys, welcome back to my July reads. This month was a bit random and I feel as if I read nothing because at the tail end of the month I finally started checking out a little known K-pop sensation called BTS, and I haven't picked up a book since, but clearly this stack tells me otherwise. I'll start with this incredible Yoshitaka Amano art book, The Sky, The Art of Final Fantasy. It's 3 volumes in this stunning slipcase of concept art for the game Final Fantasy, ranging from the years 1987 to 2001, from Final Fantasy 1 through 10. There are literally no words, as it is purely an art book with illustrations of character designs and story art. I'm not a gamer, but my husband's favorite game is Final Fantasy VII, so I got this book for him to peruse, and I am an Amano fan, so in that context, I enjoy this book quite a bit. His line quality is mesmerizing. One of my favorite mangas is the original Cardcaptor Sakura, and when I was a kid, I did not have the money to buy every volume, and instead borrowed them from my friend Victor and pored over every detail in the drawings. So luckily for me, in my 30s, there is a new Cardcaptor Sakura Clear Cards series that takes place when the characters are slightly older, and the storyline is not as captivating as the original, but the characters are just as wholesome and delightful and cute as ever. I love their family friendship dynamic and how supportive they are to each other. I read Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, which I think is pretty well known in BookTube, and I wonder if it'll become a classic of sorts. It touches upon the themes of capitalism and the concept that your identity is tied to your profession, but on the lower rung of the ladder, where a college graduate spends her career working at a convenience store and her peers wondering just what the hell is wrong with her, questioning her functionality and contribution to society. As a normal woman in her mid-30s, Keiko, our protagonist, is expected to have some sort of an office job in addition to a long-term relationship, if not already married with children, in which case she could be excused from work life in order to be a housewife, tending to her family. Instead, she finds complete fulfillment in the daily proceedings of retail life, which to me, as a former retail employee and now a housewife with children, I find nothing incredulous whatsoever about this premise. Murata writes the mundaneness of retail work life as borderline magical, and Keiko as a near cyborg in her hyper-competence fulfilling the duties of her job. It's pretty clear that Murata is an advocate for women and their right to do whatever they want with their own lives, but a key detail in Keiko's personality, like her 100% sociopathic violent tendencies, completely undermines this conviction. Instead of coming away from this story thinking, yeah, of course, if she's suited to this job, then that is what she should be doing, I'm left with a bad impression of Keiko. I end up taking the side of the majority who make her feel bad for her lack of achievements. There's just no reason for that small but explosive personality quirk that sabotages Murata's good intentions. I heard John Green promoting Clint Smith's How the Word is Passed, a reckoning with the history of slavery across America, so I gave it a go, and it's incredible. Smith structures the book into 8 chapters at 8 locations, providing the big picture of how widespread the effect of slavery was and remains to be today. At first, I was a little distracted by how personal he wrote in this historical nonfiction, since that's not exactly what I'm accustomed to, since he placed himself fully front and center in the context of the narrative. Then I realized that this is extremely purposeful, and without placing real human beings in these stories, it makes it that much easier for us to discount their very real experiences. To place these people and their lives so far back into the annals of history to no longer be relevant today when, as he argues, that is far from the case. He goes into very current topics such as Confederate statues, the lost cause concept, reparations. I especially liked the Frederick Douglass quote he included. The duty of today is to meet the questions that confront us with intelligence and courage. If you've been wondering about the current dialogue regarding any of these topics, this is a must-read. I was so jazzed to read more critical race theory, a term that I just heard for the first time this month, that I read James Baldwin's Dark Days and Martin Luther King Jr.'s Letter from Birmingham Jail, both Penguin Modern editions. As far as I'm concerned, James Baldwin should be considered essential American high school reading curriculum. I especially like the line, "The more you learn, the less you know," but that means that you have begun to accept and are even able to rejoice in the relentless conundrum of your life. It's a rude awakening to find history still so relevant today. MLK Jr. said, "One has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws." I used to have annual rereads, and every summer I'd read Nabokov's Lolita, but this year I substituted that with the Lolita podcast series that I highly recommend whether you've read Lolita or not, and read the more recent Consent by Vanessa Springora. She wrote a memoir about her relationship with the nationally renowned French writer Gabriel Matzneff when she was 14 and he was 50 during the 1980s, who went on to write books with characters very clearly based on her, and how much these experiences devastated her. My body was made of paper. Ink flowed through my veins. My organs didn't exist. I was a fiction. The pedophilia is awful. The raking her name through the mud is awful. The reminder of extreme progressive politics is awful. But the light at the end of the tunnel is the fact that we are at a place in society today where the real-life Lolita, nay, the Dolores Hayes, survives and goes on to tell her story and be heard and supported. We're far from the end of the fight, which is why I continue to remind myself through rereads stories of misogyny, the male gaze, etc. during the summertime when we can get too caught up in bikini bods or beach romances. I heard a lot about John Ronson's books and was most intrigued by So You've Been Publicly Shamed. One of the cases he discusses is the PR executive who tweeted right before her flight, "Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white," and the aftermath of her worldwide public shaming, getting fired from her job and being unable to find another, death threats, living with the constant shame following her around for the rest of her long life. He goes over the misogyny that is a huge factor for many of the women who experience public shaming, with threats of rape and murder for their dumb and insensitive but generally harmless mistakes. I wanted to read this book while it's still current and relevant today, but I was very disappointed by this because Ronson never seems to be able to get past the pity party for the victims and the overall message of, "We should rein back the vitriol of public shaming, it really sucks, guys." Furthermore, he tinges the sentiment with the afterword of his own experiences of public shaming, where he wrote that rape for women is equal to a man losing his job, and how sucky it was for him to get canceled over this, especially when the statement was never meant to be published. So in other words, I was hoping for some sort of enlightenment regarding this topic, and instead I read 300 plus pages of a man essentially saying, "This is so scary, not for what it's doing to civilization, but because this can happen to me too." After that disappointment, I wanted to turn things around with, hopefully, some exceptional writing in Lot by Bryan Washington, and my hopes were well-founded. Oh, this is so beautiful. Like a Lucia Berland, Juno Diaz. Ma told her to wait it out. That's just what America did to you. They learned to adjust, she'd crack the code, but what she had to do was believe in it. The phone company lets her do whatever she wants because she can enunciate, but if she'd laced those buttons from the beginning, she wouldn't be scrounging in the first place. Every short story is gripping. I'm so impressed, thoroughly wowed. At this point, I felt like I had to lift my mental state even further, and I sought that from Calypso by David Sedaris, who is perfect when you're in desperate need for the funnies, and a reminder of good people out there. Giggled throughout, especially his musings on his Fitbit. Of course, being the womp-womp Wendy that I am, this isn't entirely lighthearted, as it gets pretty personal and dark, with essays on his mother and sister's deaths, palpable grief and regret, and the love he has for his family. I love David Sedaris and think he's a beautiful human. Continuing my quest for highbrow positivity, I read 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff, which is a compilation of correspondence between a New York writer, Helene Hanff, and some of the employees of Marks & Company, a used bookstore located in London with the address of the title. The letters were written between 1949 through 1969, and full of charm, wit, and that special intangible something that only occurs through human interaction. In the span of one letter, I cried and lolled. I loved this. When I was at Bookends Kailua, a used bookstore in Hawaii, I found a library book of Catherine called Birdy by Karen Cushman, which came out in 1994 and won the Newbery Honor Award. I read this as a child, borrowed it many times from my local library, and was thrilled to reread it. It has an opening line stunner. I am bit by fleas and plagued by family. Just as charming and punchy as I remember it, the strength is in her spirited voice, her desire for a life worth living. I was reminded of Parker Posey's scene in this series, Louie, when she says that girls need to feel free to access their darkness, and that's okay. And why not, since her life, and indeed Catherine/Birdy's life, are filled with men constantly disappointing her. Lena Dunham is writing and directing the film adaptation that I couldn't be more excited for, and I'm hoping that she gets this feeling across. I suspect I may have an addiction to cake books, but I read Cake by Maira Kalman, and look how cute. I love the handmade quality to this little cookbook and the simple, straightforward message of cake is good, eat more cake, cake is life. The acrylic painting illustrations are sweet, and simple little details like a face painted green instead of peachy pink to suggest shadow is what gets me. After reading, I made a cheesecake just for the hell of it. It was good. It was life. The standout of the month, and possibly the year, is the discovery of Kim Bo-young, a South Korean science fiction writer. I read The Origin of Species and the Other Stories, and I'm Waiting for You and Other Stories, and like with most other Korean and Korean American writing, but especially for these books, I was floored, I was devastated, I was stunned, I was cut to the bone by the succinct, sharp emotions. I haven't felt this way since Otessa Mashveg, like I'm reading something profound. It exemplifies the beauty of science fiction, not about science at all, but using it as a device to examine our reality with fresh eyes. So if somehow data could be a personality, then the you in my memory is a personality too. It's you. If that's true, then you're living with me now because I remember you. You're with me as informational data in the biocomputer of my brain. You're alive as long as I am. That's why I want to keep living, to make you live, to keep you, who I love most in the world, alive. Words that are spoken have power. As long as they remain inside your head, you can always take them back. But once you utter them, everything changes. I implore you to read anything by her. These are the 15 books I read in July. It was a little all over the place and random, and I intend to be better planned for August. Hope you all had a great reading month, and as always, thanks for watching. Bye!